Celeste Friedman, composer of the music score for Irving Renquist's Ghost Hunter, and this is part 2 of an overview of the music. In the 7th episode, Irving plays a tape for Dottie of the residuals talking. Irving and Dottie are in her bedroom again, where a vase of roses explodes on the dresser. A picture falls from the wall. And on tape is the voice of Dottie's mother. In this cue, the residuals, an oboe glides along backed by a modulating bell pad and high vibe tones. By the end of the scene, Dottie admits to Irving that she may be falling in love with him. Later, Irving and Julia are telling Dottie what they've learned about the poltergeist Alex. They're sitting in the kitchen where salt shakers on the table begin to jump and move around a little bit. The tension increases as if the air in the room thickens. I used a tolling bell and distant tom-toms to be followed by a choir of voices in this cue that I called Alex's theme. Alex is an agitator, so the music is a bit monotonous. In another scene in episode 7, Julia and Irving have gone back to his apartment. Dottie is alone in her room. Julia gets a message on her phone and leaves Irving, and he is alone. So the scene rocks back and forth between Irving alone and Dottie alone. I wrote this cue that I called Listen, which includes lonely piano, deep bass violins, and high chimes. And Irving ponders, what if we were wrong? Then in the scene with the vinyl LP record where the needle is going toward the end and we suddenly hear Andy's voice, we discover that Andy is recording his own suicide. After the gunshot, this cue, Unanswered Questions, begins with a bass guitar and high piano notes. Dottie is grilling her father about her mother and how she died. This cue lasts a little over 3 minutes and builds with tension and anger in both Dottie and her father. I'll play a little bit of this for you. The percussion hits repeatedly toward the end and bass violins join in. cue transitions into a second movement that I called What You Don't Know. It frames the scene where Julia and Irving are trying to figure out the meaning of the symbols on the vinyl record. So we'll move into a simple piano, hi-hat, cymbal, and bass violins. As episode 7 comes to a close, Dottie calls Irving from a motel room. She is alone, but she tells Irving that she thinks Alex has followed her there. This cue I called Danger Zone uses a lot of electric guitar effects and percussion. At the start of episode 8, Julia is looking through a box of Christine's things, and I used this cue as a theme for Christine with lonely, sentimental piano notes and thirds. This is called Christine's Memories. In the box, Julia finds a notebook and a diary of Christine's, and the notes contain similar symbols as found on the vinyl record of Andy's. Julia tries to decipher the meaning behind the symbols. In this cue, between the lines, I play a little bit of bass and piano and lilting strings as she's trying to figure the mystery out. This will transition into a cue that I call Emergency Part 2, a variation from the opening cue of episode 8, with electronic drums and strings and xenon pads. A haunting breath closes the cue as Lonnie shuts the trunk of his car. Well, Irving rescues Dottie, wraps her in a sheet and puts her in the backseat of his car and races to get help. Dottie slips in and out of consciousness and argues with Irving that she is not Alex. The title of this next cue comes from this scene, and Irving's line, "I can't do this alone." Beats on the floor, tom and pizzicato strings open a scene where Lonnie arrives at Dottie's house. He gets out of the car and unloads several tools and a camera. His mission is to dig up the spot where he believes Dottie's mother is buried. This cue, called Digging Up Bones, is drum intensive with pizzicato hesitations. In episode 9, I used a cue I had written a few years before called Storm. With low strings and piano playing, you see Lonnie with his video camera in one hand and a shovel in the other, documenting what he is about to do. While Lonnie is outside in the hole, Irving and Hedges sit in Dottie's kitchen discussing ghost hunting. And I created a cue for this scene called But What If It's Not, playing off of Irving's dialogue as he and Hedges ponder what is real and what is not. This cue has only a simple piano melody, closing with a windy voice as Dottie wakes up in the other room. Dottie, Hedges, and Irving watching the residuals manifest themselves in the bedroom gave me the opportunity to create another Druid piece. Based with piano and strings, a choir of voices chant O Dominus. Vona sovi etra pro nobis is sung as they watch in horror while Dottie's father murders her mother. In my original demo for Irving Renquist, I sent Dave this cue that I had written a few months earlier called the Visitation. David and Michael decided to use it for the scene where Dottie is sitting on the sofa in a catatonic state. It's one of my favorites, beginning with a haunting breath and high vocal transition into brushes on the snare drum and a low oboe. kisses Dottie goodbye. She remains curled up on the sofa wrapped in a blanket. This cue left alone plays with low strings moving up into a high piano section. Well, Irving, Julia, and Lonnie are celebrating because they believe they've closed the case. So I thought for the celebration scene I'd use a jazzy R&B cue called The Toast. As Season 1 and Episode 9 comes to a close, Irving does a radio interview about the case. While listening in another room with Lonnie, Julia discovers the vinyl record underneath Irving's sofa. She peels away the center label, which reveals the letters H-E-L-L. After the radio interview, Julia and Lonnie go looking for Irving and can't find him anywhere. Maybe he's disappeared into thin air, or maybe he has vanished through one of his theoretical stage doors. This final cue is called Stage Doors. Once again, this is Celeste Friedman. This has been a music overview of the score for Irving Renquist's Ghost Hunter. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed it.